I'm Linda Watson from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I am delighted to have this opportunity to share with you this case study program on enhancing pretend play skills in preschoolers with autism spectrum disorders. So first, I want to disclose to you that I am employed as a professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm receiving financial compensation from ASHA for this presentation, and I have received grant funding in the past from the Institute of Education Sciences for the development of some of the research that's being used in this presentation. I'm also the lead author of the Advancing Social Communication and Play Intervention Manual and Materials, and you will see some of those in this presentation as well, but I do not have a financial interest in the materials at this point. So now on to the program. I want to start by introducing some background information to clarify why pretend play may be particularly important for young children with autism spectrum disorders. So Karen Lifter has offered this definition of object play. And as we talk about pretend play, this is something that builds out of children's interactions with objects. So she says that object play consists of spontaneous, naturally occurring activities with objects that engage interest and attention. The way this object play develops over the child's early life period is that we begin to see children engaging with objects as infants when they're about 3 months old, and they began to develop the skills to reach out and swipe at objects or grasp objects in their hands. And once they get to the point they can intentionally grasp the objects, they're going to do things with those objects. Typically, early on, they'll bring objects to their mouth, or they may shake the objects in fairly jerky motions back and forth because they don't have a lot of control over the use of their hands at that point. But as they get more proficient, they're going to expand the way they explore the objects by feeling them, poking at them, dropping them, banging them, and continuing to put them in their mouths for many, many months. Initially, when infants are in this exploratory play stage, they are interacting with one object at a time. But as they get closer to the end of the first year of life, they develop the capability of relating objects to one another in simple ways. So they become quite fascinated with putting objects into containers or taking objects out of containers, stacking things up, banging things together. And so we call this period of development of object play skills the relational play period. Then not too long after infants and toddlers begin to engage in relational play, we see them engaging in functional play. So these are conventional social uses of objects in play. Some examples might be seeing a toddler taking a cup that doesn't actually have anything in it and pretending to drink from the cup, or taking a spoon that doesn't have food in it and feeding themselves with the spoon, or offering the spoon to someone else to take a pretend bite off of the spoon. During functional play, we're beginning to see the emergence of pretend play, but infants and toddlers are using these objects in the way they see people around them in the world using the objects. So it's conventional use of objects. So then at the next developmental stage of play behavior, called symbolic play, this will come in probably around 18 to 24 months of age, and we begin to see children incorporating object substitution. So they'll use one object to stand for another object, such as picking up a block and pretending like it's a cell phone. They also may use pretend objects, so they will pretend like they pick up a cell phone when there's no object there and hold it to their ear as though they're talking on a cell phone. Or doing things like role play, where they pretend to be a person and engage in activities that would be characteristic of a person that they are not, such as a mother or father, or even a more fantasy character. So now that we have that background on the development of pretend play in children, let's talk about why pretend play might be particularly important for children with autism spectrum disorders. First of all, there's been considerable interest in looking at pretend play in children with autism because characteristically children with autism show delays in their development of pretend play. So pretend play has been found to be correlated concurrently with the language development of children with autism, their imitation skills, their cognitive development, and their social skills or their social deficits. And also, longitudinally, the pretend play of a younger child with autism is going to predict what their language gains will be like later, even after you account for what their language was when they were younger. But all of this evidence is correlational, and we know that correlation should not be considered causation. So this doesn't say that pretend play skills are what's causing the language development later. However, we have now some intervention research that does give stronger evidence that pretend play can play a direct role in improving children's language skills. The most compelling study that I know of comes from work that Connie Cassery and her colleagues did. They randomly assigned children to one of three groups. One group got a symbolic play intervention, a second group got a joint attention intervention, and the third group did not get either one of these interventions. But all three groups of children were involved in 30 hours a week of intensive early intervention. So that makes it even more impressive that a 6-week intervention, brief intervention, focusing on either symbolic play or joint attention, resulted in children having more intentional communication and better language 1 year later compared to the children who were in the control group. We know, as speech-language pathologists, that early language, is very important in later outcomes for children. And this is especially true in the area of autism. Preschool language skills have long been recognized as good predictors of long-term outcomes in individuals with autism. But how could pretend play actually contribute to better language? Some possible processes linking pretend play to language development in ASD could come from how pretend play is involved in the interaction that children with autism have with their caregivers. So first, again, some correlations. Pretend play of children with autism has been correlated with some interaction variables that such as the caregiver responsiveness. So children who have better pretend play have caregivers who are more responsive. Children who have better pretend play have caregivers who are providing them with more cognitive stimulation during their interactions. And children who have better pretend play spend more time jointly engaged with their caregivers. Again, this does not mean that the pretend play is causing the caregiver changes in the caregiver behaviors, nor that the caregiver behaviors are necessarily causing the children's pretend play to be better. So the current conceptions of this is that there are actually transactional effects between children's pretend play and caregiver behaviors. In other words, both of these things are happening. And so some researchers refer to this as a bidirectional feedback loop between children and their caregivers. And it's particularly important in pretend play because pretend play is providing an excellent context in which caregivers can scaffold the social skills and communication skills for children with autism spectrum disorders. This would be a good time for you to pause the program and write down a few sentences that you could use if you were going to explain to a child's parents why you are recommending pretend play goals as part of a treatment plan for a preschooler with autism. Okay, now we're going to move on to talking about the assessment of pretend play and identifying reasonable goals for children with autism. In your packet, you should have a play hierarchy that looks like this. Now, I've truncated this over the one that's included in the handout packet because we're going to be focusing particularly on functional and symbolic play today. Keep that play hierarchy with you for the remainder of the program because you'll want to be referring back to it. When we do assessments of play skills in children with autism, we talk about mastery of the different levels of play using the rule of 3. So our rule of thumb, or rule of 3, is that we assume a child has mastered a level in the ASAP hierarchy if he demonstrates 3 different unprompted examples of the behavior during the school day. Our intervention has been used in school settings. You may be seeing children in a clinical setting, so you could change this to be 3 different examples at the end of your clinical session with the child. Now we're going to practice some with this assessment of play by looking at a child who's named Devin. And Devin is a preschooler we worked with in the ASAP research. He was 3 years old at the time we did these videos, and he was in a self-contained classroom setting for children who were on the autism spectrum. He is a child who was speaking in 1 to 2 word utterances at the time we were working with him. We're going to look at this video clip of Devin, and as you look at it, make notes or note in your head the kinds of play you're seeing Devin engage in. And then after the end of the clip, pause the program and look at the play hierarchy to see if you can fit the behaviors you see Devin using into the play hierarchy.
Set.
Now what do we need?
Ready, set, Love. Blue card. Oh, yeah.
All right, so now we're going to see a little bit more of Devin's play interactions in the same setting. And so again, if you will look at this video clip and make some notes and look at the play hierarchy to see where the behaviors fit into the play hierarchy.
Ready, set, go. Ready, set, go. Ready? Oh, Brent. Ready, set, go.
You're hungry. More? Thank you.
Oh, I got it. French. I'm gonna fix it out. Fix it. Fix it.
All right, now we're going to look at Devin's play in a different context. Here he's working with the speech-language pathologist that he saw at his school. And so, again, make notes, pause the video after it's finished, and refer to the play hierarchy.
Here's my cake. I cut it. Here you go. You can eat. Mmm. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Spoon. Oh, good asking. Good job. I have a scoop. Here's more ice cream. Get the cone. Good job. Ready? Scoop. Can you do? Here you go. Scoop. Oh, it fell out. Scoop. Ice cream. Ice cream. Grandma wants some. Give some to Grandma. Sit up, Grandma.
Okay, now we're going to look at the assessment results that we got from looking at these video clips with Devin. We identified 3 different examples that were unprompted of Devon's play behaviors at the functional play level 1. And this included cutting with a knife, rolling a car along a path, and demonstrating tool use with the hammer and a screwdriver. We would consider this having met the rule of 3 and that he has mastered the functional play at level 1. We also saw some emerging play behaviors with Devon. He included a doll or action figure in pretend play with toys, when he fed the dog that the speech-language pathologist sort of pushed toward him. So this is at the functional play level 3. And we also saw 2 examples at the symbolic play level 4, which is using a toy or object to represent something else. And the examples of this were that he pretended that the screwdriver was an airplane, imitating the teacher's model. And he also pretended to lick the baseball as though it were an ice cream cone. So we identified these as play levels that were emerging in his play repertoire. So now let's look at the play hierarchy and talk about how we use the play hierarchy in the ASAP intervention to establish a child's goals. So say we had observed a child to do the assessment, and we found that the highest level on the play hierarchy that he had mastered was at functional level 4. So what we want to know now is where we will go next. So one option that we have is to go down the hierarchy under functional play to functional level 5. Or the other option we have in this case is to go across in that same row to symbolic level 1 and choose the symbolic level 1 as the next goal for the child, this imaginary child that we've assessed. Or you could certainly work on both goals if you wanted to work on 2 goals at the same time. When you see the next slide about Devon, I want you to pause at that slide and reflect on which play goal or goals you would choose for Devon. So we see on the play hierarchy that he has mastered functional level 1 and that we saw some emerging skills at functional level 3 and at symbolic level 4. So where would you go with Devon? So our team might have decided to go to functional level 2. That would have fit with what I suggested before, to go down a level from the mastered level of functional level 1. But we actually decided to start him at functional level 3 because we had seen some emerging play skills at functional level 3. So you don't have to be rigid about your use of the play hierarchy. You can use your own clinical judgment in making these decisions. So now we're ready to talk about supporting pretend play development in children with autism and intervention. One of the first questions that we face when we start any intervention with a child is how much time should we think it's going to take to see some functional, meaningful changes in the child's behavior. So we don't have really great answers about this in terms of pretend play from the research that's been done. In the original study that Connie Cassary and her colleagues did, they provided 15 hours of direct one-to-one intervention to the children provided by someone on the research staff, so a trained person doing the intervention. In other studies, Connie Cassary and her colleagues have provided 10 hours of parent coaching, and in yet another study, they provided 24 hours of parent coaching. But the strongest evidence for impact on the children's later language was actually seen in the first study where they had 15 hours of direct one-to-one treatment. This was done 30 minutes a day over the course of 6 weeks. Now that doesn't turn out to really fit too well with most of the clinical settings in which we work. So our team actually adapted this to the real-world setting of public schools. And our adaptation was to recommend that teaching teams, including teacher and speech-language pathologists, should work on one-to-one intervention 40 minutes per week across the school year, and that they should also endeavor to incorporate ASAP goals into at least 3 classroom group activities per day, And in each of those activities, to try to give the child at least 3 instructional opportunities to practice or learn the targeted goals. We use an acronym, SEW, S-E-W, when we think about designing the activities and implementing activities for promoting pretend play goals. So we're going to go back to Devin again with the example of working on the goal at functional level 3. He will include a doll or action figure in simple pretend play with toys. The activity we've developed here is a grooming activity. So the S in SEW is for setting it up. Before we start doing an intervention, we want to be sure we remember what the objective is for the intervention. And so we have that in mind, and then we plan for materials that are going to afford the child the opportunities to play with the objects in a way that would meet the goal that we have, that we're addressing in the intervention session. So the E in SEW stands for engaging the child. And in engaging the child, we want to think about the arrangement. So certainly we want to have the child in close proximity to the teacher or SLP or whoever is doing the intervention, and the materials. And then under the activity, you want to think about what are the strategies you're going to use to promote the child's learning. We'll talk about options for strategies in a minute. Then the W in SEW is for wrapping up. And so in wrapping up, at the end of the session, the end of the school day, or whatever length of time you are with the child, you'll want to think about whether the child has demonstrated mastery of the goal you were working on, using that rule of 3. You also want to think about whether the child, if he hasn't mastered the goal, has he made progress? And we recommend thinking about a 2-week time frame. So if you haven't seen any progress toward reaching a goal in a span of 2 weeks, then you want to really think about, well, how does this need to change? So the first thing you can do is to monitor yourself. Review your intervention activities, think about whether the child has been interested, motivated, engaged, and if not, maybe you want to try some different activities or strategies. But if you feel like you have done the best and you have had motivating activities and the child is just not making progress, then we would recommend you return to the play hierarchy and back up a step or go across on the row to a different goal in the same row, or possibly to go to a higher level goal if you have seen evidence that that particular level is emerging in the child's play behavior. For the next slide, I want you to again pause the program and reflect on 2 questions. First, if Devin had mastered the functional level 3 play goal, where would you go next? And second, if Devin had been working on functional level 3 play goal for 2 weeks and had shown no progress, where would you go next? So here's the play hierarchy again. He had originally mastered functional level 3. So in the first scenario, imagine that he's mastered functional level, he originally mastered functional level 1. Now imagine that he's mastered functional level 3. Where are you going to go next? And then imagine that he has made no progress on functional level 3 in 2 weeks. Where would you go next? In the first case, where he's mastered functional level 3, you may decide that you want to go to functional level 4, and that's certainly a reasonable way to use the hierarchy. You might also have considered going to the symbolic level 4 since he's shown emerging skills there, but that's quite a few leaps down. So our recommendation would probably be that you stick with functional level 4 as the next goal for him. In the case where he's made no progress, you might have decided to back up to functional level 2. And again, we think that would be a reasonable way to use the hierarchy to identify a next goal for him where he might be more successful than he was at functional level 3. Okay, this next video clip is not of Devin, but it's of a child in the same classroom with him. And this child is a child who does not have any spoken language skills yet. And he's also quite a bit more distractible than Devin. So he's a little bit more challenging to work with. The teacher in this case is incorporating a picture system both to cue him about the possibilities of ways he could be playing with objects as well as to give him a way that he could communicate about the play activity they're engaged in.
Come on, dolls. Roll.
There is sick. You want to do his blood pressure?
Ready. Should we just finish or do you want to do more?
Doctor,
Blood
pressure.
What color should we put on?
we love the blood pressure.
Color.
Ready, squeeze? Here you go.
We're going to do it together.
Squeeze,
Ready,
squeeze.
Madison?
Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Good boy, Jonas. Look.
Caroline has a turn, and then Madison will have
What does
a
he
turn.
want next?
Shake it.
Oh. There is sick. Choo!
You can watch it.
Shoo!
You might get more pain on
The doctor wants. There is sick. What does the doctor want? Does he want a shot or an otoscope? The doctor wants. No, he's sick. Does he want a shot or an otoscope?
Okay, Caroline, Madison's turn.
There, the doctor.
Madison's turn right now.
There Can we do a shot or thermometer? Okay.
On the sides.
Doctor wants
This way.
thermometer.
No pain, Caroline.
Good boy. Let's see. Oh no! Oh no! He's hot. Can we take Miss Jeffers? Miss Jeffers?
Good job, Madison. That's pretty.
Oh, I'm all better. Can we do Jonas's? Jonas's thermometer. Good boy. Do the bears? Bear thermometer? Good job. Oh no, he's hot. Ouch! He's hot. Ouch! Ouch, he's hot. The bear is sick.
And this next example is a small group activity in another classroom where the teacher is working with 3 higher functioning children with autism. I love this video clip because you will see initially that the children clearly have a routine around object substitution where they're playing with magnet blocks and pretending like they're microphones. But the teacher is wise enough to know this needs to be changed up. And so when she changes it up, it really clarifies why it's very important when working with children with autism to be sure to address goals in a variety of contexts and a variety of activities, that we don't want them to be completely bound to routines.
Okay, now what can we make with this stuff? I've got a round ball.
Papa, a microphone.
A microphone? Brandon, show us how to make a microphone.
I'm a sewer.
I am doing great. How are you doing? I'm doing fantastic.
What was your name?
My name is Miss Sarah. What's your name?
Alex.
How are you doing today, Alex? Good. Glad to see you.
You been today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm nice.
Have you asked Brandon?
Yeah.
How's Brandon doing?
Ask him. How you doing? A pumpkin! Ice cream dome.
You want a lick?
No.
Tastes really good.
It's a microphone.
I made an ice cream cone.
No.
It's strawberry. You want to taste?
It's not taste.
It's green. Pistachio?
No.
Here, try mine again.
Microphone.
Can I try yours?
So if you would now pause the program and go back to Devon and design another activity for Devon, either a one-to-one intervention or a small group activity that would provide Devon with opportunities to address the functional level 3 play goal. The next 2 slides are going to summarize some empirically supported strategies for promoting pretend play skills in children with autism. First of all, using materials and activities that are of high interest to the child. We tend to think of restricted interest as being an area of impairment or difficulty for children with autism. But in fact, there's been quite a bit of research that says if we meet the child where he is, using those areas of high interest, we have a better chance of expanding his skills than if we try to interest him in things that he's not already interested in. So meet him where he is and take him from there. A second strategy is to use natural reinforcers. And this really can be related to that first strategy. If you're using materials and activities that are of high interest to the child, you don't need to introduce additional reinforcers such as food or claps or cheers even, because being engaged with the materials and the activities are going to reinforce that child to continue the behavior that you are trying to get him to exhibit. Another intervention strategy that's been found to be effective in the work of Connie Cassery is a strategy that they called mirrored pacing. And this involves imitating the child's behavior when the child is engaged in appropriate and functional play, being sure that you time these imitations to occur when the child is focused on that play act and are imitating him within the child's line of view. Another strategy that's been found to produce changes in pretend play is to do naturalistic teaching of imitation of actions on objects. These don't all have to be symbolic play or pretend play actions on objects, any actions on objects. But those seem to, when the children acquire those skills, that has a positive benefit for them imitating pretend play actions. An additional strategy, a verbal strategy, is to use follow-in directives. So this would be when you see a child interested in playing appropriately with a toy, to follow into that interest by suggesting what he might do next with the toy. This has been found more likely to be followed by functional play than if you use a follow-in comment to comment on what the child is doing with the toy. And then, of course, probably all of us would use scaffolding by demonstrating pretend play skills and prompting the child to engage in pretend play skills. Last of all, there's been considerable research done with using video modeling, including a strategy called point of view modeling, where the video is made as though the child were looking at the toys through his own eyes. So now look back at the activity you designed for Devon. Did you incorporate any of these evidence-based strategies into the activity, just intuitively? And which of the strategies could you use for the activity you designed? So there are a few key take-home or take-to-work points that I'd like you to remember from this case study. First of all, that research has linked pretend play to later language and communication in young children with autism. And this may be because pretend play triggers transactional processes that support language and communication learning for these children. Developmental sequences of pretend play skills can provide useful guidelines for intervention content. There are varied, easily implemented strategies that can enhance pretend play in young children with autism. But evidence-based practice requires that we collect our own data on our clients' progress by monitoring, by doing that wrap-up step in the intervention to be sure that our clients are making progress and to help guide our decision-making. So I hope you have fun playing with your young children with autism. And this presentation has addressed facets of one of ASH's 8 strategic objectives. You can learn more about this objective and the other 7 strategic objectives by going to the webpage at the bottom of this slide. Thank you so much.